And it's Thursday, it's Matters of the Heart, and with me in the studio is our guest, and that's David Cranor. You're welcome, David.
Thank you once again, Martin.
It's nice to have you with me again in the studio. And David, I wonder if you can just whet the appetite and just tell us the issues or the topics we're going to be talking about today.
Sure. I'd just also like to say happy 5th birthday to Wild Coast FM.
Oh, right. Thank you. Yes.
A high five to you guys.
And a high five to us. You know, I think it's just so wonderful that after 5 years we can host a program like this. And I'm just hoping that all the listeners in the Overstrand area just feel so happy and grateful for the radio station that they're going to donate and help us to get that license and keep going for the next 5 years, offering the kind of services we do offer. Up till now, it hasn't been too encouraging, but we're hoping that things will pick up as people get into the festive mood.
Yeah, keep that faith alive. Eh?
Absolutely, for sure.
Well, the topic today is being authentic and real to who you truly are. And when you do that, then it's easy to be authentic and transparent in the various areas of your life. So we're going to be talking about that and also going deeper into holistic ways of the holistic perspective.
So we're going to look at authenticity, and that really will probably touch on very much on, is your word your deed, and do you honor your word? Are you true to your word, or are we really also deceptive? And then that also calls for not only when you talk about authenticity, you're talking about sincerity as well, and we can look at that. What does it mean when you're sincere? Well, we can check on that, and that looks to the value of honesty.
Yes, exactly.
And we can look at that in the way in which honesty is. They say honesty is the best policy, but it's very seldom practiced.
Yeah.
And just looking at the spin that goes on, it's quite serious. But anyway, we'll get into that a little while later. But I think what would be good for us to do right now is just to take an ad break, and then we'll be back. Well, we're going to be looking at this question now of being authentic. The moment you say authentic, it rings a bell somewhere, because I remembered something some while ago, David, and that was the word authenticity and sincerity. Sincere. And I was concerned about the word sincere, because people say yours sincerely in their letters. And are you sincere about that? And yes, I am. And when we are sincere, our authenticity, our authorship of ourselves comes out.
That's right.
And I think that's what authenticity really means, that we author who we really are.
Yes.
But sincerity is a Greek word. It comes from the Greek word sincere. It's a fascinating word, because when the Greeks started trading with North Africa, they wanted this white marble with which to build their temples, and they were trading with the people in North Africa and with the Phoenicians. And what was happening was that they wanted blocks that didn't have cracks in them, because the moment the stonemasons started working on them and it had a crack, it had to be rejected, because it would crack up. It wouldn't take the pressure. So they decided that they would reject on the harbour all the ones with cracks in it. And how did they know? Because what the traders were doing, they were filling the cracks with beeswax. So they would buy these, take them up the hill to the temples to build, the stonemasons get working, and the block cracks in half. And they've paid all this money for it, and it's useless, and the traders have gone back, and they've got their fortune with them.
Yeah.
So what they did was they put the blocks, and they made it a rule that all these blocks of white granite or marble had to be put into the sun for 10 days. And if no cracks appeared, then it would get a stamp on it, sincere, which means without a crack.
Wow. Sure.
So
that's a wonderful...
It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful story, because if you are sincere, you are without a crack.
Yes.
And then you can take the pressure of being part of building a community, part of building relationships that you can fit in that you can slot in without cracking up.
That's it. Yes.
So that's authentic.
Yeah.
That's the authenticity of it. And I think what is interesting about that whole idea was that sincere means that you slotted in with perfection, so that the geometry of the building was perfect.
Mm.
So it goes beyond just, being out in the sun for 10 days, which means you take the heat of the day, also that you've gone through a trial and proved to be worthy.
Sure.
So that authenticity is something when you author yourself through hardship and you author yourself through fitting on and showing your support, then I think you are sincere.
That's it.
Then I think you're authentic.
Yeah.
I find this authenticity something also interesting, because there's this authenticity on a social level when we are truthful. We become authentic. But there's also another level of authenticity that strikes me about people. I was talking about quite an aggressive person the other day, and this person comes across as really aggressive and somewhat bombastic at times. But ever so now and again, the curtain parts and you see that authenticity of this person, that uniqueness of this person, the vulnerable person underneath it all.
Yeah.
And that shines out, and then the curtain closes again, and this person's hyper-aggressive again, and there's this mask, and every now and again he can't keep up the front because the curtain opens, and he shows something of the authenticity of who he is. And that's another level of authenticity, because I think each one of us are authentically ourselves underneath it all, made as an image of God, authentically a blueprint of the divine. So I have a sense that this authenticity that you're talking about, and I'm going to let you go for it now, I just wanted to share with you some perceptions about that.
Sure, that's such an inspiring story that I feel that I'm very enriched by that story as well. That's a beautiful story to get to the origins of the word sincerity.
Yes.
So beautiful. And what a great foundation to build your life upon is sincerity.
Yeah.
A natural sincerity.
Absolutely.
Not this false, pretentious sincerity.
Correct.
That a lot of people try, they try and be good. But to discover that you are goodness itself produces a natural sincerity. And you're mentioning the curtain as well, and just thinking about a curtain, and the one patient walks into a doctor's office and he says, I'm feeling like a bit like a curtain today, doctor. So the doctor responds and says, pull yourself together.
I love that.
And it's such a challenge to us to really go deep within and start to become honest with who we truly are. Because as you mentioned, the blueprint of our lives is God. That's where we originate from. And it's a beautiful place when we can get to that space of honesty and sincerity, when we can start to become comfortable with who we are. Then we start to embrace every single emotion in our life, and we start to be in a space of non-judgment. So we can embrace even the emotions that we think we are uncomfortable with, and we can start to see that there's a beautiful gift in that emotion, and we can start to enjoy our lives actually. And then that's where also transformation takes place. Transmutation and transformation is when you can observe these emotions, and then by so doing you can see that this has a deeper purpose to it. And that's also like a lesson that we can all learn, that there's a spiritual gift in the suffering. And to bring into the fact of the holistic way of thinking, I think is very beautiful to talk about authenticity as well, because to talk holistically means to include everything. If you take an example of a tree, for instance, a tree exists because of non-tree parts. It exists because of the sun, it exists because of the soil, it exists because of photosynthesis and all these various contributing factors. A tree is not just a tree. And so if we can see the context of our lives as well, the context that there is a holistic way of thinking, then we can be so much more open as well, and we can be so much more authentic. And there's a few scientists out there that do go in the wrong fashion, that say that they have a bit of a simplistic way of thinking, where they say that God does not exist, for instance, and then they stop there because they say there is no empirical evidence, instead of keeping an open mind with humility. And I think to get to a space of authenticity, which would really start to put you on that journey where you start to ask questions about the human condition, where the empirical evidence will not particularly point towards, yes, there is a blueprint of the divine, but it could definitely suggest something. And I believe that these questions can only arise when we start to become transparent and we start to open our minds and open our hearts. And talking about the fact of transparency and authenticity, it's so important to be authentic, because what we tend to do sometimes is if we are lying, or if we are keeping we're denying an area of our lives, then we try to build a sense of expectation upon something. So we build something up, and when that expectation is broken, there is this pretentious fumbling that happens. Whereas if you're just honest with that area of your life, you experience a genuinity. If for example, if someone's going through a really tough time, for them to acknowledge and for them to embrace the tough time, you could see straight into that person's heart, because he's being authentic and he's being genuine. And that's an appeal to everyone, is just to be so honest with who you are, with whatever you're going through. And the thing that I do agree with, also what science also points to, and the thing that I also agree with, is that when you are honest, then that is very empowering, because there's something empowering about getting to know the facts. If, for instance, there's maybe 20,000 Rand in your bank account, that's a fact. And it's important to say that and be honest with that, instead of saying there's 80,000 Rand in my bank account, which would create suffering and would put false expectations upon an event. But to be honest with where you are is almost saying, I'm being authentic, I'm being original, and I'm living in the present moment. I'm not trying to get somewhere that I'm not.
Yeah.
You're embracing this moment as it is. So that transparency that we all have the capacity to awaken to is such an important dimension, especially in the day that we're living in today. I took a walk through Swelihle as well, and there's something so beautiful about the township there. They don't have all the infrastructure in place maybe, but there's a natural sincerity. It's almost like they've embraced this place as home. It's not like they're trying to get somewhere else. This could be a deep discussion that could go very deep, but
sure.
There is a lesson behind being very open and honest about your situation. And when you're honest and open about your situation, that's where God has opportunity to work through you and to work through the situation. I don't think He will have opportunity to work through a particular situation in your life if you're not honest with it. So being honest with it builds that natural sincerity and that natural compassion that all the spiritual teachers refer to.
I think that one of the things that you touched on very gently was this question of judgment. And we sometimes judge ourselves so harshly that we put ourselves down so harshly. Sometimes we're our worst critics. And while it's good to, I think, be conscious of your weaknesses, but never to judge yourself too harshly, because being a harsh judge means that you not only judge yourself harshly, but then you have unrealistic standards for others as well. And nobody can ever measure up to that.
Yes.
So, and then we become dismissive of ourselves and others as not being equal to. And so we must be very careful about this question of judgment and the dismissal of ourselves.
Yes.
But to look beneath the surface areas of appearances and say, well, what am I truly and really underneath it all? Can I get into contact with that? Can I be that which I truly am? Without the judgment, oh, I've let you down, and I've let myself down, and I've let this one down, and I couldn't accomplish that. And we total up the list of so-called mistakes and disasters until such a time we're buried beneath them.
Absolutely.
But if we go back to what happened at the time, we did the best with what we had and what we knew at that moment.
Yes.
Or we would have acted differently.
Exactly.
So this thing about judgment we have to be very careful about and
Yeah.
very gentle with. Here's a piece of music by Eddie Amos, and it's called Cantilena. Right, David, we're talking about this whole question of being authentic, transparency. You know, we hear a lot about transparency, you know, especially with regard to public services and corruption and stuff, a system that is transparent. And how do we apply transparency to people? I mean, surely I don't want to be transparent where people look right through me. What does it mean?
There's wisdom in discernment, I think. There's transparency is that old little cliche, wearing your heart on your sleeve. And there's something beautiful about that. And if I could give a suggestion about trying to establish that space within you, I would say give up all the selves that you have created, all the roles that you've created in any context that you've been in, like if it's a social gathering or if it's a family braai, or even if it's a radio interview. People have this tendency to create roles and selves for themselves. And what happens is you start to become identified with a role, and then you start to think that that role is who you truly are. So what you really want to do is you really want to eradicate those belief systems, and you want to step outside of those roles and selves And what will happen is the true self will start to emerge. And there's a deep wisdom in saying that you should never put someone on a pedestal and never put someone in a pit, but put them straight into your heart, because that's how everyone should be treated. And the danger of a few ways of thinking is that they think hierarchically. And what that creates is a distance between people thinking that some things are superior and inferior. Whereas if you can start to think in a network fashion, in a fashion that is holistic, then you start to observe things as they are. Because if you look at nature, the daffodil never thinks that the lily is any less beautiful. It just is. And we can view everyone in that same light. Whether you are a supermodel or whether you have a face for radio, everyone is in the same light. They've all got this beauty. And there's a story that I heard that the one, it's the story about this husband that he's looking for a wife, and so the husband comes to the father and asks, "Can I please have a look at your 3 daughters?" And the 3 daughters, so the father responds and he says, "Absolutely." So the father brings out the one he thinks is the most beautiful, and so the husband asks, "So how many cows can I get for her?" So the father responds and says, "Well, I will, I'd say 20 cows." So then the father brings out the other daughter, the middle daughter, who is also pretty but not as attractive according to the father. And so the man asks, how many cows for this daughter? And then the father responds and says, 12 cows, I'd say 12 cows. And then the last daughter is shy, but she's hidden underneath all her insecurities, and she comes out, and according to her father's perception, she's not as pretty. And the man says, "I'll give you 100 cows for that woman, and I'll also give you 10,000 rand." And the father is completely shocked by the answer and perplexed. So the father agrees, and they get married, and eventually they come back a year later, and this woman is beaming, and she's absolutely beautiful, and she's beautiful from within, she's beautiful from without. And the father doesn't understand this. She's had this complete shift. And then after months of contemplating this, he eventually asked the husband, how did you transform her into this beautiful princess from nothing? And then the man obviously gave her the space to decide that she is beautiful from within. And he responded, he says, when you love a person for who they are, they change into who you love. And you're not trying to actually change them, but you're just loving them for who they are. And I think that that's also a lesson into being honest and open and transparent, is to love things as they are. And it's almost like you grow in this awareness towards what is beauty really. And God's almost trying to show you what beauty is really. And that's also the beauty of meditation, is meditation allows you to see everything as it is as well. Another word maybe for meditation would just be to be peaceful with your thoughts, observe your thoughts in a more practical sense. So I'd say that one of the ways to be transparent is for sure to start to have this contemplative, still disposition that you are, wherever it is, even if you're at a traffic circle, to start to become conscious of the reality as it is, the emotions that you're feeling as it is, the sun, if it's hot, if there's clouds. You start to become honest with the present moment, and then that grows a sense of appreciation towards this present moment, and it doesn't build a false expectation upon anything. It just puts you so fully in this transparent, open-hearted place that is full of love and light, and that in a spiritual sense is being open with that God gene within you.
I think that's so much to do with holism, and it's not just thinking about who I can present myself as, or what I present myself as, or what I can accomplish. It's rather the focus on just being who you really are. And I think that focus then implies so much. There's a kind of a spillover, is there not, with that kind of focus of just being where you are and who you are. And a lot of times when I was counseling, the difficulty people had with accepting themselves as they really are. And the reason why I spoke about judgment earlier on was that many people are so harshly judgmental of themselves that they never accept who they are. And if I may, just into a workshop once where there were a group of social workers, and one of the exercises was to embrace yourself as a child and to go to your earliest recollection of yourself as a child and to see that child in front of you and to go towards that child in your imagination and put your arms around that child and just hold that child. And many people entered into it. So it was quite an emotional experience for some people to go to that little child within. But there was one lady who reacted so violently. She said, nee, ek kan nie daai kind hou vas nie. Dit is 'n afskuwelike, vreeslike kind daai. She could not embrace the little child within. And over a period of time, during that week, we had a number of interactions. And towards the end of the week, she began to see the brightness of who she was.
Beautiful.
And as her gift to the group, later she said, my gift to the group is that my child is welcome.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, it's the self-rejection, or I'm not good enough. And yet you are.
Yes.
And I think the experiences that I have seen in people in counseling sessions and in workshops waking up, and that's the privilege of having conducted these things. Even sometimes in the very heart of a business meeting, I was running some strategic planning for an organization, and suddenly somebody just brightened up and said, oh, I see it. And that started them on a trajectory of management development and self-development they'd never seen before.
Wow.
So it's those moments.
It's like a quantum shift that takes place.
Absolutely. And it's when you're there and you see it, it's like, oh, look at the sun coming up.
Yes, light bulb.
Absolutely. Here's a piece of music by a Russian composer, and it's called, it's from a CD called A Symphony of Raindrops. And he says, so I'm an islander. Let's listen to that.
Hi, I'm Barry Hilton, and you are listening to Wild Coast FM, the rhythm of the Overstrand.
That was an interesting piece of music, and I hope people didn't go and close their windows quickly because of the thunder, because it's quite realistic. I played that piece during the winter, the first time I played it, and it was a cloudy night, and I heard this on the earphones, and I was quite worried, that maybe I'd heard the thunder, but in fact I hadn't. It was just on the recording. All right, we're back again, and we're looking at this whole question of holism and the question of honesty, transparency, and being authentic. David, earlier on you mentioned this thing about the roles that we take up. One of the interesting pieces of research I did many years ago was into role attachment. And how do you become attached to a role? And it revealed some remarkable things to me, because I did some research amongst teachers in South Africa about how they take up the role of being a teacher. Anyway, I developed what I found an interesting continuum of role expressions, and where the role is, you're attached to the role in a balanced way, where you allow yourself to express yourself in the role. The role becomes an avenue of self-expression. But then there are always, there's this dichotomy kind of thing that happens. People distance themselves from their roles. In other words, they just do what they have to do without any presence of themselves. And I had I developed what I called a role distance measure, and I was measuring different teachers, the way they distance themselves from what they do every day. And while we have to keep a healthy distance, there's an unhealthy distance. And then I also measured the enmeshment, or the over-identification with the role. What happens? We lose ourselves in the role, and we become lost. And our identity crisis is huge. So this thing of being in the role is augmented, or let us say it is assisted by being in the moment. The moment you're trying to live into the future too much, and trying to project how I want to be like, that great person there. You're projecting yourself, and you're not in the moment. You become enmeshed. You over-identify. Where you have lost interest, or you don't see yourself as realizing anything within the role, you distance yourself. And distance has a huge implication for yourself, for society, and the job you're trying to do. And we mustn't lose sight of this, that we express ourselves through the roles we take up. But I like what you said earlier on about sincerity. If we take up our roles and we're cracked, in other words, we're taking it up on the wrong reason, there's no sincerity in the performance of the role. And people will know it, and we will lose face.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
That's right.
But interesting, when you over-identify and you go over the top, you lose yourself in it, and that too is inauthentic. That's a big crack. When you distance yourself so far from it, it's a little crack, but it has huge implications. So we need to see that we must find this balance of bringing our gifts and our abilities to what it is that we do, but we do it in such a way that the authenticity and the sincerity of who we are and what I am comes through.
That's right.
And is there to bless others. Because if I have a gift and I don't bless others with a gift, what the hell's the gift for? So there are these very interesting things about roles and role distance and role attachment, and there's quite a lot of literature on it, actually. And developing a model around this was quite exciting, and
Sure.
I really enjoyed that part of the work.
Sure.
But this whole question of honesty, how honest are we with ourselves? Somebody once said to me, if you bluff yourself, you're betraying the most important person that you could ever have. That's yourself.
Exactly.
So don't bluff yourself. Don't try and deceive yourself, because that's the worst kind of deception.
Exactly. Yeah.
Be honest with yourself. So we've got 2 minutes. Do you want to just add something to that?
Yes. Not to even see anything as bad in your life. To be completely embracing everything that's in your life. And as you were speaking, the teaching of Mother Teresa came up in my consciousness, that just she was asked, what does she do every morning when she wakes up in the streets of Calcutta? And she responded, she said, she does just one thing, to see the face of Christ in all his disguises. And that also means to see the face of God in all his disguises. And so you are God disguised as a writer, as a lawyer, as a doctor. The role of your life is to be a doctor, but who you truly are is this presence, is the spiritual dimension. And what I'm suggesting as well is to firstly get to a place where you respect the roles and you respect the way the world works, and you start to see things as fact. You start to see things as common sense. And when you're in this empowered space, then you can start to creatively use this unknown canvas, and you can start to create. And you're not limited. You're absolutely in the present moment, and you are so engaged in this moment that the inner genius awakens from within you. And as that previous song came on before about the thunder, you can learn so much from nature, and to know that we are part of nature. Nature does not lie. Nature is so transparent. The sun just shines, the rain just falls. Just observe your thinking as well.
David, once again, my thanks to you for coming in and sharing these insights with us with Matters of the Heart. Please join me next week.
I'm away for 2 weeks, but
Yes.
I'll be back after that.
All right. So David will be away for next 2 weeks, but join us after 2 weeks and we'll have this moment together again for Matters of the Heart.
Happy birthday to Podcast FM.
Thank you very much.